morning. Well, a few months ago, I was very fortunate because I went to a PFLAG meeting in Visalia, and at that time I heard Dr. Sarah Ramirez speaking about the work that she's doing here in Tulare County. And hearing her speak about her work around health and education and community building just was very, very inspiring. And I knew from the moment that I met her that we would need to work together. And so we've been doing so ever since. And I'm just very inspired by what she does. And it's a wonderful opportunity to meet her, to work with her, and to help her do all the wonderful things that she's doing here in Tulare County. So please welcome Dr. Sarah Ramirez.
So can everyone hear me in the back? If I project? Good, because I like to walk around and I'll be telling lots of stories. I'm very grateful to be with you here this morning. Thank you for the invitation, Nicole. Thank you for having me here. I saw the schedule of events. I feel like I'm in good company, very interdisciplinary, history and anthropology, and I have all of those experiences. I'll be telling you a little bit about that as I get started, and I'll share a little bit about myself and about the work that my husband and I have been really pushing forward and moving forward here in Tulare County, along with other friends and allies that we come across along the way. And so, we're always told, I'm an epidemiologist, that's one of my training hats. And so I always look at numbers and statistics, but always what they tell us is never begin with numbers and statistics. So instead, I'm going to show you pictures of cute kids. And this is how I'm going to start. And these are a couple of the children that have been joining us in some of our harvest and gleaning events. I love to put up a picture of little David because he's only 2 and he's out there picking fruit with us, with his family. And of course, one of my favorites. And I'm excited to be here too. I went through it very quickly because not only did we just celebrate Earth Day, and a lot of our work and our projects focuses on cultivating and nourishing a healthier community through feeding, through good health and good nutrition. But today is also Pay It Forward Day. How many of you are familiar with Pay It Forward Day? So a few of you, okay. So Pay It Forward Day is this idea of paying forward our kindness or a random act of kindness or paying forward inspiration. And so I hope that, with having both days taking place this week, that my conversation here also inspires you, and maybe you see your role in inspiring and paying forward some hope and inspiration to other communities, to your own communities. So I wanted to tell you a little bit of where I'm from. So I grew up in Pixley. How many of you know where Pixley's at? Okay, how many of you have been to Pixley? Okay, so quite a few of you know where it's at, and quite a few of you know have been there too. So my husband and I both grew up in Pixley, very small community. It's actually one of the smallest unincorporated areas in Tulare County. We have many of these, and it's also one of the poorest in Tulare County. And I always think about what motivated the work that I do, and I think about my home, and I think about my family. And growing up in Pixley, one thing that I learned about was the people around me were getting sick and ill, and sometimes dying prematurely, what we call prematurely. So they were dying before their life expectancy should end. So if we're assuming in health and population health that people live to the age of 75, but they're dying at the age of 50, they lost potentially 25 years of their life. So I want to introduce you to some of my family members here. So on the left is my grandfather and one of his friends. I never met my grandfather. My grandfather started coming here to the United States as a worker in a part of the Bracero program. And he went back and forth between Mexico and the U.S. And he actually died of cancer at a very young age. Not even my dad grew up with my grandfather. My grandmother, Maria, in the middle, she also came to the U.S. and worked in the fields, like my paternal grandfather had. And she lived in Pixley, and this is how my mom ended up in Pixley. But I never met my grandmother either. I was the last grandchild she saw. She died several months after I was born. And they both sort of died of different types of cancers or mysterious, I never quite get it. I'm sure we all have those stories in our family. We're like, you know, they died of something, but we don't know what it was, and doctors really didn't know what it was either. And on the right-hand side are two other people from my family. My grandmother, my paternal grandmother, my dad's mom, and my aunt sitting next to her. And both of them have passed on. My grandmother, I used to be the translator for her when she would go to the doctor as a little girl. And I'm sure many of you have this experience where you go with your family members or great, friends, and you served as the translator. That was my role growing up. And my grandmother started losing her sight when I was a child, and I remember when I would go in to translate with her, she would tell me the stories of being out in the fields and having the planes fly over and spray while they were working in the fields. And she swore that that was the reason she was losing her sight, because she had looked up one too many times and it had landed into her eyes. Now, I don't know if that's really the cause of her blindness, but I will tell you that at the time that she died, she had diabetes, and advanced diabetes, and we know that diabetes causes damage to nerves, to kidneys, to eyesight, right? My aunt next to her died very young as well, probably in her 40s, due to the complications to diabetes. And one person who's not up here, who played a really big role in shaping who I am and what I do, is actually my dad's twin brother, who died 2 weeks after his 40th birthday. At the time that he died, he had been undergoing dialysis for quite a while. He had lost his sight. He'd had one leg amputated, and he was in the hospital, and they were going to amputate the second leg. And at that point, he told my dad he didn't think he could keep going because he was being torn apart bit by bit. It started with his toes, and then it moved up to his knee, and then all the way up to his leg. So I tell you these stories because this is my reality. This is a shared reality for many of us here in this community. I also compare that to other experiences. This is my family in Mexico, right? And very typical, right? The men hanging out on one side of the yard, the women hanging out on the other side of the yard. And if you see lots of gray-haired people in these photos. Something that I don't see here in the U.S. with my family. And I have to ask myself, why is that? Why is there such a big difference? And this is something that I took with me to, and I had with me in college, trying to figure out the whys. Why is there such a big difference with who lives and who dies, and what can we do about it? And so when I went away to college, I really, like many of us here probably, I wanted to escape. I wanted to get out of Pixley. And I figured that I was really good at school, and so school was going to be one of the ways I did that. So I actually started my training at UC Davis, and that's my nephew. It's his first year up at UC Davis right now. I also completed a master's degree in Arizona State and began my doctoral program at Stanford. Many of you might find that familiar, that image of Stanford. But while I was at Stanford, I kept thinking about where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, and where I was in this, literally the ivory tower. And I felt like I was becoming a really good critic of seeing all the stuff out here, and my training was making me be a good critical thinker, analyzer, a good historian, a good anthropologist. It was an interdisciplinary program. But I didn't feel like I had much else that I could do. So I started a program at Columbia University. I moved to New York and worked on my degree in epidemiology because I wanted to understand public health. Originally, when I had gone off to school based on the stories I started with, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. But what my experiences in my training taught me was that what we're dealing with is something much deeper than what I felt could be addressed through medical care alone. I didn't know what that was. And so it kind of took me in this roundabout, circuitous route. And even while I was away, I would have my professors. So this is actually something from the local papers. I was in the School of Public Health, and one of my professors said, "Hey, aren't you from Tulare County? Did you know that Tulare County is in the news today?" And this is what she sent me. So some news coverage that came about the poor, obesity paradox, right? The poor face higher obesity because of unhealthy food is more affordable. Working poor faces higher obesity rates. Unhealthy food is cheaper and easier to obtain. And if you read, I'll read the other part of the article. So it was talking about a particular family, a particular individual, Iris Caballero, who suffers from diabetes, and her sister Saida eat lunch in their home in Cutler, California. Obesity has replaced malnutrition as the most common nutritional problem among America's poor, research suggests, right? And I read the article, and I read about a young woman in Cutler who was only 15, and her high school was having to adapt because she had lost her sight due to the diabetes at the age of 15. And the school was having to create new programs or find a way to accommodate her need, but they were creating new programs to address this concern of diabetes in our communities. And so I'm in New York, and I see Tulare County, I see home in the news. And I kept putting pieces together. I was in New York, a very different environment. I was actually teaching a cook shop program, which was one I would go and teach to first grade group. And it was really funny when I walked in to talk to the first graders. They were doing a lesson on carrots that day, and they had just read a story about Farmer Betsy and all the different types of carrots that they grew. This was my first day showing up to cook shop, and the kids turned to me and go, "Are you Farmer Betsy?" And I thought it was the cutest thing, and I didn't know what to say to them. I said, "Well, I'm not Farmer Betsy, but I am from an area where we do produce a lot of agriculture, and I have grown a lot of my own crops." But what was really fascinating to me was being in such a densely urban area and having to introduce to children who had never seen a plant before where we got our food from. Or my first experiences in going shopping in New York and finding that a lot of the fruits and vegetables were already in styrofoam packages, sort of shrink wrapped. There was usually one in there that was always rotten in the bunch, but it was turned upside down. And I realized that here in California, we're really spoiled, or I realized that I was really spoiled, because I went to New York and the environment was completely different about where I could go do my shopping, or how I could get my food, what kind of food was available, what was I willing to pay, what did the quality look like. And it was funny to me because I realized those questions are really not that different from what we experience here. It's just a different setting. Because in some of our communities, and I'll talk about this, we have in Tulare County 14 food deserts. Does anyone know what a food desert is? Maybe? Yeah, 1, 2. Okay. So I'll talk about that when I get there. But so I'm observing my environment, observing my experiences, and thinking about everything that happened to me before I went to college and everything that's happened to me in school, I have this little image of the happy faces and sad faces, because even when we think we're at the best places, I had some of my hardest experiences at universities, right? There was a point where I had a professor say to me that I was the biggest outlier that they had ever accepted into a program. And I wish I had at that point read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, because then I could have taken it as a positive thing rather than feeling like it was a negative thing. It's one of the reasons why my husband and I feel so committed to encouraging and connecting young people to go to college with other role models and mentors who have been there and who are currently in the university system, and I'll talk about that too at the end. So what did I learn? I learned what was going to be important to me from these experiences. I want to share a little bit of this poem because I heard it in college, my first year in college, second year in college, and I recently heard it at a conference in public health a couple of years ago. And it asks, one day the apolitical intellectuals of my country will be interrogated by the simplest of our people. They will be asked what they did when their nation died out slowly, like a sweet fire, small and alone. What did you do when the poor suffered, when tenderness and life burned out of them? Apolitical intellectuals of my sweet country, you will not be able to answer. This is a poem from Otto René Castillo, and it has always been something that I kept in my mind. I didn't go away to college to become part of the ivory tower. I went away to college to acquire some skills to address some real challenges and bring real solutions to where we need them the most, like here in Tulare County and like here in Pixley. I also learned about this concept called the organic intellectual. So in some ways, we are all organic intellectuals. And what is the organic intellectual? It is, a definition might be something like this. Those most connected to a specific class in the sense that they can best articulate the worldview of an emerging important class of people. But to me, when I think about organic intellectuals, I think about our experiences and how that makes us an organic intellectual. No one knows more about Tulare County than us. No one knows more about maybe living in a family who is food insecure, or living in a family who works in the fields, right, than us. And it's our voices that need to be highlighted. So here I am studying health and health inequities, and I'm telling you about everything that has been contributing to my thoughts, to my philosophies, and I'm looking at data like this. Last time I was actually in this auditorium was several years ago. I was working at the county health department as the epidemiologist. And what I did was I analyzed data. As an epidemiologist, as I track data and analyze it. And this is some of the data that I might look at. This is from the county health teams. Health outcomes, Tulare County ranks among one of the lowest in the state of California, 47 out of 56. But when we think about our health factors, and these are the other things that contribute to disease: literacy rates, language, poverty levels, food access, we rank dead last. I also looked at things like death and premature death. Obviously, I've been talking to you about people who died before they were supposed to, or before we expect them to. So as an epidemiologist, I would do something like this. I would track where people were dying and what they were dying of. So let's compare. North part of the We can look at a census tract in that Kingsburg, South Dinuba area. Life expectancy is 84 years. But when you look at the Porterville area census tract, the life expectancy here is 69 years. What explains that 15-year difference between one part of the county and another part of the county? What explains that the years of lost life? So remember that person who died at age 50 and should have lived to age 75? They contributed 25 years to my age of lost life bucket. So as an epidemiologist, what I do is I add up all those early deaths and to create this years of lost life. So when I looked at deaths between 2005 and 2007 in that north part of the county, early death counted for, 1,769 years. But we have almost 3 times that amount in Porterville area. 5,000 years of lost life, of premature lost life. I look at some of those socioeconomic factors, things like high school education, families in poverty, and we see that there's a huge difference between what we might find in the north part of the county and here in Porterville. High school education is 65% north part of the county. Here it's about 48%. Families living in poverty in the north part of the county, 12%. And here it's 32%. Huge difference. Could that be contributing to those early deaths? We look at the statistics of obesity and overweight. And Tulare, not only is the San Joaquin Valley worse than what we see in the state, Tulare County is among the worst in the whole San Joaquin Valley. We look at food insecurity. So here again, we see that Tulare County, we have more people living in homes where they don't know where they're getting their next meal than what we might see at the state level. So with this graph, what it's showing in Tulare County, we're slightly lower than California. But when we break it down by children and adults, Tulare County fares one of the worst. 1 in 3 children under the age of 18 live in a food insecure home. On average, it's about 1 to 5. According to the USDA, we have 14 census tracts that are food deserts. Now, food deserts are communities where you don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables within 1 mile. In a rural community, this doesn't make sense to me given geographic isolation and our challenges with transportation in this county. In a rural community, that's expanded to 10 miles. I don't quite understand that because if you're living in Poplar or Pixley and you don't have a grocery store nearby, and say you're geographically isolated, you don't have a vehicle, how do you get to those 10 miles to get to the grocery store? So again, 34% of the children in Tulare County, ages 0 to 17 years, have low food access, and 18% of all Tulare County residents have low access to healthy foods. I also look at things like socioeconomic indicators. I won't go through all of these, but I just want to highlight a few. Median family incomes. This is my hometown of Pixley. That's Cutler that we saw in the news clippings just a few minutes ago. And compare that to places like Visalia, what the median income looks like, what high school education looks like, and what the total children in poverty look like. Very different. And I know my husband, who's incredible. He's a math teacher at high school. He actually teaches at our alma mater, Tulare Union. He's a math teacher. And I just happened to find this one, and it fits so well. How do we expect young people to complete high school, go on to college, to be ready to think, to concentrate in class, when we're dealing with all these larger problems, whether it's sickness, hunger, homelessness, and so many other things that all of you know about. I don't have to tell you, because you know it, you see it, you live it. And we bring all those burdens with us wherever we go, including the classroom. But schools aren't necessarily equipped to address this. So, I guess you could say, here I am, working in the health department, finishing up my doctoral degree. I could be going anywhere. And I had this little car accident right before I finished my dissertation, actually about a year before I finished my doctoral degree. I was coming home, I was excited that I had finished another chapter in my dissertation. So a dissertation, for those of you that don't know, is basically a draft of your first book. So you've been doing all this research as a graduate student, now you're supposed to put a book together. And I had just finished another chapter. I was really excited. I decided to veer off the normal course because I had written a chapter, and it won't surprise you. It was looking at the invisibility of poverty and inequity in the San Joaquin Valley. And I was writing about West Fresno County. So I decided to take a drive through West Fresno County because I wanted to acknowledge the people who lived there and sort of that history of that place. I don't have any memory of my car accident. I remember that morning. I have flashes of the accident itself, like someone saying, I have to pull you out. I smell fluids. Or me telling someone in the helicopter, please call my husband so he knows where you're taking me. So I have little flashes like that, but other than that, I don't have memory of this accident. But I will tell you what it did. I was in bed for quite a while. I fractured my cervical spine. I didn't have to work. I didn't work on my dissertation. In fact, I don't think that I could have finished my degree if it had not been for whoever found me. Because whoever found me actually collected all my archival materials. Those of you who are historians know how precious and important our archival materials are. They actually boxed everything back up. So when I could finally sit up again and I didn't have a swollen face, I would go through my materials and find bits of glass and rocks and weeds and blood and all kinds of stuff. But I cleaned out my files so that I could pick up where I was again. But it gave me time to reflect. Am I doing what I really wanted to do and what I set out to do when I first went away to college? So these are the questions I was thinking about. And then I was also thinking about the top 5 regrets of the dying, and many of you have probably seen some of these. So some of the top 5 regrets of the dying are statements like these. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I'd let myself be happier. And I kept remembering all the times that I would go to an advisor and I say, I have this great idea. I want to do this project in Tulare County, and they would tell me, it'll never get published. You'll never get funding for it. Don't waste your time. If you want to be a researcher, an academic, it's too small a population. You need larger sample sizes. You need larger data sets. And so I felt like I would go in with these wings behind me that would get clipped. So I thought about all of this. And then I remembered contrast, inspiration. When did I have the moments where I felt inspired? This is something I ask you all to do. Ask yourself, when do you feel the most inspired, the most alive? For me, this is what I came up with when I made my list. It who's practicing service, promoting health, focusing on justice, dancing with others, cooking with others, learning with others. Those were the moments of inspiration for me. And it wasn't necessarily the track that I was on. So again, I kept thinking about my family, what's left of my mom's siblings, and my nieces and nephews and cousins. I kept thinking of ways to reprogram the training that we have in our families, right? So some of us might have these experiences where we have parents who tell us, what do you have to be sad about, depressed about? Save your tears till the day that I die was one of my mom's favorites. And then I would look around and I would see that at home, and some of the people around me just really seemed to think that there was no hope for change. And it just seemed like it was this self-perpetuating cycle. But I knew that there was something else because I had experienced that. So I want you to close your eyes for a second. And I want you to imagine. Imagine a community in which we experience a healthier quality of life for everyone. Keep your eyes closed. Imagine a community in which we find joy in working and playing together. Imagine a community in which we increase our ability to meet our own needs locally. Imagine a community where we want to live. Imagine a community where we still have hope for the future. What do you imagine? Go ahead and open your eyes. Does anyone want to share? Do you imagine that for yourselves? Do you imagine it being here in Porterville? Do you imagine it being in a place like Pixley? Sometimes when I talk to young people, they don't imagine it being here. They don't imagine it being possible here. They want to get out because I'll be happier somewhere else, because I'll find success somewhere else. And I have to ask the question, why can't we bring the outside here? Why can't we bring that hope in that community here? I think we can do it. We just have to want to. So I decided that to share some of my philosophies here. I believe that service to others is an act of love and my commitment to equity. I believe that small acts, no matter how small, ripple into big waves of change. And I believe that my purpose is to cultivate equity, hope, and compassion through the practice of service. And so this is what I have dedicated myself to do. Doesn't pay much. I often say I work to fund what I don't get paid for. So I teach at Cal Poly as a lecturer, and that helps me fund the projects here at home. So how do we move these types of ideas and thinking forward? I actually think we need to do it in an interdisciplinary and holistic way, through collaboration and through self-compassion. So my husband and I started a group that we call Be Healthy Tulare, very grassroots. And our goal is to cultivate a healthier Tulare County. Yeah?
Today is actually Pay It Forward Day.
Yeah. I mentioned that at the beginning.
Oh.
And I said, I hope it inspired you to pay it forward. The hope and the ideas. So thank you for reminding us, because I really want you to think about it as we go. So we, in a small group of volunteers, have this unwavering belief in the power of love, right? We are collaboratively seeking to usher a healthier and compassionate community by rebuilding social networks, cultivating hope, dignity, and fostering resilient individuals. And I think that hope and dignity is something that we can pay forward, just like inspiration. And I mentioned to you these inequities, right? These disparities that I studied. Well, I believe that we can create an environment where equitable health is possible for everyone. And I think that we can do that by broadening our access to local, sustainable, health-promoting resources, knowledge, and skills. Now that's a lot of words, but what does it mean? We have a lot of science that tells us that we can extend our life, that we can prevent diseases or delay the onset of Alzheimer's if we do eat better, if we meditate, if we, engage in all of these activities, exercise. But oftentimes that information, that science, isn't brought here. And I think that that's one of the biggest injustices. Talk about it. You're going to tell me that if I meditate as a practice 5 minutes a day, it could extend my life, and we're not going to give that information to the people that are dying youngest? That doesn't make sense to me, right? This is a skill, this is a practice, it's a way to promote health and equity. So we want to cultivate hope and dignity, foster cooperation across the generations toward this resilient, sustainable, and healthy community. So let me tell you a little bit about how we do this. So we do it with our educational outreach, through being cooperative and participatory, being multi-generational, thinking about no waste, sustainable solutions. And this means using our existing resources. I don't think I have a picture of my husband's little truck, but we use and abuse that little truck to no end. And I also think that just as we have science to help us think about promoting health, we also have cultural traditions and the wisdom of our cultural traditions and the wisdom of our local knowledge. People who have knowledge and skills and experiences, and even though they don't have formal educations, they have a lot to give and to share. And we want to validate that too. I'll tell you about our dreams, but just in terms of on the cooperative and participatory, when we started our community garden, we asked the children what they wanted in the garden, and we got images like this. One of my favorite requests from a 4-year-old was he wanted a penguin house. So I hope that at one point we can paint a mural of a penguin house, because I think that's about as close as we're going to get. So we've created a community garden in Pixley, and I like to think that we're not just growing plants, we're growing people, hearts, and hope. And so our mission in the garden is to inspire, support, and educate community by deepening our relationship to food, learning from one another through our cultural food traditions, and cultivating our own healthy and sustainable table. Here are some images, conversations, digging ditches, sort of informal, what do you want to see here? Problem solving. The images that some of the children shared with us about what they want to see there. Walking trails, an art space, a dance space, a basketball court. The trees. I think one of the sad moments was when I gave the kids the option to draw all these things, and they didn't know. When I said, what could we plant? Or what kind of trees could we have? They were very limited by bananas. Apples. Their vocabulary in terms of fresh fruits and vegetables was really limited. I gave them seed packs, and I showed them books, and I said, this is all stuff we could plant here. You tell me what we could do. And so they started drawing it in. I like to think that we're designing to promote health equity in Pixley. And this idea of promoting health equity is to reduce disparities and achieve true sustainable change in public health. We need to create health in all policies that reaches people where they live, work, play, and pray. And so this has kind of been what I'm thinking about as I dream and I talk about others of what we could design in our garden. Right? So live, work, learn, play, and pray. So we dream of what this garden space could look like. We talk about the areas to live, and this is creating sitting areas, areas for meals and sharing, for gathering, for displaying art, for storage areas. What could it look like? Maybe something like this. We think about areas where we can learn and work. There is an old concept that I'd like to revive for us. This idea of a university without walls. Having outdoor classroom spaces, having food skills, growing, preserving, consuming the food that we grow, teaching new techniques, vertical gardening, permaculture, square foot gardening, having composting areas, building skills around sustainable growing practices. Maybe it looks something like this. And I think about areas to play. Right now we have a lot of dirt. And a lot of dirt and rocks. Our garden is located in a old 99 storefront. And so we've got a lot of pieces of urbanite or concrete left over from old foundations of where the buildings used to be or where the old road used to be. There's not a lot of spaces for play. We don't have a community center. We don't have a gym. And so, people use what we can, whether that's chalk on the sidewalk or the boys using our barrels to make their own basketball court. But maybe at some point we'll have a space that looks like this for them. And I think about the areas to pray, and I don't mean praying in the formal sense of going to church, but maybe incorporating those activities of mindfulness, of compassion, of awareness into our garden activities. We're starting to add some garden games where we think we want to take moments of reflection and moments of mindfulness. And maybe that's the way that we incorporate areas to pray, right? To connect with the earth, to connect with ourselves, with our hearts. So this is where we began. Some of the property still looks like that left-hand corner picture. But this is where we are now. What we're growing. And that we continue to build. So right now, Nicole has also been joining us to help us build a outdoor oven. So this is what you see, are pictures of that outdoor oven experience. And of course, we also have fun while we're doing it. The teens and I were saying this was the poor folks spa treatment, the mud treatment, right? So this is the way we do it in Pixley. We also have a gleaning project we call TC Harvest. And it's a grassroots effort. Again, everything we do is grassroots and funded out of our pockets to raise awareness on food waste and food insecurity. We harvest trees in our neighborhoods. We have been invited to some small farms. We do education. We really think about what's in season, what's growing, how do we prevent waste, and we connect one another. Caring for the people, caring for the plants, and sharing the excess is really a big philosophy for us. Did you know that as much as 40% of our food in the U.S. gets wasted and ends up in landfills? Yet at the same time, I just talked to you a few minutes ago about how 1 in 3 children in Tulare County are hungry. How can we have so much waste at the same time that we have hunger? And how can we be one of the most highly agricultural producing counties in the state and nation and have hunger at the same time, or people who can't afford good food? And I think one of the shocking things that people don't realize is that food waste isn't just a waste of, our money. It's our waste of our natural resources, of the water, right, that it took to grow that food, of our economic resources, and it costs us even more because it produces methane gases. It produces greenhouse gases and contributes to our air pollution and air quality. But why we do it? We save food, great. We get to meet really cool people. Sometimes people who can no longer harvest the fruit on their trees, that they would normally have to pay someone to come clean it up and haul it away. And now we're going in and cleaning off their tree, and we're donating it to the food bank. And sometimes we meet really nice people, and we make good friends. And I don't know if you recognize the young man in the hat here, but he's actually a peer here in Porterville, a student here at Porterville College, and he has been joining us practically for every glean this season. He'll drive to Visalia and Tulare to meet with us, and he's been taking his younger brother too. And we have fun, right? We're out there with our friends. We know that we're doing good. So there's a good that comes from doing good. And this year we've gleaned almost 25,000 pounds. We also have our food labs. And this is our educational sort of cooking club, where we want to really think about closing our food loop, linking food production and food consumption. And sometimes we do that through traditional food practices, and sometimes we do it through healthy food practices. So I take my experiences from working in a clinic as a health educator and the challenges that people tell me they have about getting good food or knowing what to eat when they're diabetics, and I try to infuse that into our food labs. And at the same time, I also remind people of our traditional practices. So what you see up at the top was actually a picture from last summer, where I was teaching people about quelites. Now, how many of you are familiar with quelites? Okay, I see a few hands. So in our indigenous Nahuatl language, right, so that when you think about the Aztecs and the original people of Mexico, or a group of Mexico City, there were many indigenous people in Mexico, the word quelite was actually the generic term for edible green, right? So this could be any kind of green. And if you go now to even an Asian market, you'll see pea shoots, you'll see yam shoots, you'll see all kinds of greens. You'll see the same thing if you go to a mercado in Mexico. There's 20 very common quelites. People call them quelites, but they all have specific names. Quelite cenizo is lamb's quarter. Verdolaga is purslane. Here in the U.S., we call them weeds, and we kill them. But some of us who are advocates of sustainable eating and permaculture might say, how do you get rid of the weeds? You eat them. So that's what we do. So I was teaching people about lamb's quarter, how to prepare it, where we can find it. And you know what? Some of those edible weeds have more nutrition than the greens we find in the stores, than the spinach and the broccoli, have more vitamins and minerals. This has shocked some of my students to learn this at Cal Poly when I tell them that when they read it. And I'm like, these are traditional greens that our ancestors knew about and ate, and that our families, maybe our grandparents and our parents, and maybe we ourselves have grown them. But you know what? Because they're weeds, they're free. We shouldn't have a reason why we can't just take them if they're growing in our yard and prepare them and nourish ourselves. I think one of the exciting parts of this season has been our work with the high school students at Mission Oak in Tulare. So my town of Pixley doesn't have its own high school. The students feed into a high school in Tulare. It used to be that we fed into Tulare Union, now feeding into Mission Oak. And students at Mission Oak, one of the teachers, Mr. Mendoza, he and I went to high school together. And he, often asked me to come in and talk to his students. And since he's so good at volunteering me to do things like that, I saw this opportunity to volunteer him for something. And it was actually a gang prevention task force activity, something along those lines. And so I wrote to the principal of his high school and I said, I volunteer Mr. Mendoza and his class to figure out how to work with this. And what they're supposed to do as part of this project is they're supposed to pick a problem that they want to work on in the community and do something. Just do anything. And it turned out that they decided to take up hunger. And they have, on their own school campus, collected data to find out how many of their peers experience hunger. So in their little data collection, they found out that about 14% of the high school students attending Mission Oak High School claimed that since the beginning of the school year till March, when they collected their data, 14% of them said that they had experienced going to bed hungry or not having enough food to eat. So I think it brought it home to them. So they've been joining us to Gleaning, and they have actually mobilized other high school students to join us. So we had an opportunity to glean from a 5-acre field in Visalia. They brought out a bus load of 70 students with them to join us. For some of us who are professionals, we might say, this is great leadership training. The students are not only being featured in the paper, they've actually had a chance to write their own articles and get them written up. They've presented to the school board, they've presented to the Health Advisory Committee of Tulare County. But I think more than anything, what matters to me is that they're paying it forward with their compassion and awareness so that they work with the younger generation too. So I get them to now be the leaders of our Gleaning project or in our garden. So many of you have probably seen this, this idea of what success looks like, what people think it looks like, and what it really looks like. I've just explained to you my life in those squiggle terms. But it's not just success that we have to redefine and think about in these ways. I think we also have to think about it in terms of happiness. Happiness is not something that just happens to us when we get that good grade or get that good job, and there's always ups and downs. It's something that we create. So I talk about compassion, and why is that part of feeding people? For me, compassion is the recognition of suffering. I see a problem, I see hunger, I see all these challenges around health, but it's also the willingness for us to do something to remove the causes of that suffering. So if that means we grow our own food, we reduce food waste, can that help us remove those causes of suffering? I love this quote here. It's not how much we do, but how much love we put in the doing. So I feel that if I put a lot of love, even into my small activities, that it can actually ripple into something bigger, because small actions matter. And so I'm here to say to you, there's lots of opportunities for you to even join us. Maybe you become a volunteer with us. Maybe you decide you want to lead a team of gleaners. Maybe you help us find trees in the community. Maybe you join us in Pixley day after tomorrow when we keep building our oven. And May 4th when we will finish, hopefully, building the oven and move on to some sheet mulching. Follow us. We do have a Facebook page. We have a website that I haven't been able to keep up on as much. We also have a group on Facebook that we call TC Campus Link, where we try to connect the students who are in college, those of us who have gone through college, but we're all from Tulare County, so that we understand that we're part of a bigger network. And that's my email. So with that, I think I've left you with about 3 minutes to ask your questions for Q&A. Feel free to ask away. What's that?
Who are your sponsors?
Right now, we don't have any sponsors. I mean, depending, when we started our garden, we got, someone donating manure to us, someone who donated pallets, but we don't have any concrete sponsors. We do have people who have donated to the project, individuals who just like what we're doing and want to support us. Other questions?
Yeah. Now, all this food that you have, all these different plants and vegetables and fruits, do you have a lot of knowledge? Is there people who are helping you can and jam and preserve these things like that kind of knowledge, or maybe use the leaves or certain things for basket weaving and stuff like that?
We share the knowledge, but we're always looking for people to share more with us.
I like that.
So,
I'd like to be part of that.
yeah, so that's the idea, it's about, like I said, we may not have formal educations in some of us, but we have experiences and knowledge that I think we need to cultivate. So if I bring the abuelita to teach us how to make traditional mole, we have a fun time, believe me, right? And I have learned to can, and we do have jamming sessions, but some people know how to make things or jam things that I don't make, and so then they come and teach us. And so then we become a community where we support one another. Great question. Any other questions?
One of the things you said you valued was, or believed in, was small changes ripple out into big size. Did you give us an example of that?
I think this is it. I think that our gleaning project, our first year gleaning, literally it was, my husband, a couple of friends, one vehicle, start knocking on doors, trying to find the trees, to now someone offering 5 acres and being able to show up with 70 volunteers. And those 70 volunteers may only show up, a couple of times, but I never dreamed a moment like that I would see a moment like that. And so it was actually really emotional to stand in front of the high school students, and this was just a month ago, and to say to them, I never imagined that we would go from 4 people using the back of our pickup to now having a trailer and having to come back multiple times to fill that trailer from one place and having 70 volunteers. And I wish that we had all those volunteers all the time, but we start somewhere.
How economical is cleaning?
For whom?
Oh, for cleaning.
Uh-huh.
Is it very economical? I was just wondering.
Well, I guess I'm curious, economical for whom? For us, it costs us gas, driving back and forth, pulling a trailer. But I guess when I think about it in what we do with the food, so we donate it to the food bank, right? Now our food bank feeds about 1/4 of the population in Tulare County, about 125,000 people. Now, that may not make a big dent in her budget when we bring in 2,000 pounds of fruit, but it saves her from having to spend money on acquiring fruit like that so that she can put it towards other purchases to feed people. So I guess when I think about the economics of it, I think about it as we are preventing food waste and all its various costs that come from food waste. We're helping out the homeowner. We're donating it to the food bank, who then doesn't have to purchase all the fruit that we're bringing in for free from the community. And so it's actually, our trees keep producing. The trees produce. And so we're just putting it to use. So I don't know if there's that I would have an answer to that particular, is it economical? I mean, like I said, it costs us to glean, to drive around, but
In addition to what he was saying, I just wanted to add, when you say economical, to me, it's, you know how somebody mentioned, I don't know if it was you, about pay it forward. When you do things like this, the way I look at it is your health. How much are you going to spend in your health in the next 30 years? Where if you prevent eating healthy and you do those good practices, economically that turns out pretty big.
absolutely. I mean, prevention, when we think about the medical models and the public health models, we know that the medical models are much more costly. We also know that that's where money mostly gets invested. We're not doing so much on the preventive side. And this is one of the challenges. The reason we don't put so much money into the preventive side is because we're having to imagine what we save. And that's really hard for us as to analyze numerically.
Your community garden, that property, was it donated property? Was it property that a friend of yours had? Was it just property that you could accumulate?
It's actually a property that my dad purchased many years ago and put in my name. So I was really lucky to be able to say, we have this, what do we do with it?
So, do you just meet every Saturday? Is it during the week? When are the days you do things?
So Saturdays, we're in the garden. And because we're in the garden on Saturdays, we end up gleaning on Sundays. In the summertime, we glean also during the week because that produce is a lot more timely. Like there's a time factor in it, right? Stone fruit, berries, you got to get it out and disseminate it quickly. And so sometimes I get a call from a homeowner who says, this goes back to this issue of canning and economic costs. I get a homeowner who calls me and says, I have peaches, they're falling on the floor, they're damaging, they're going to waste, come get them. By the time you call me like that, those peaches probably should have been picked 2 weeks ago. And so it's probably a peach I can't donate because it's less shelf stable, but it's a peach that I can use for our cooking classes or for our jams. And so then we make sure that it's still not wasted by doing something else with it. Other questions? Well, I'm happy to hang out outside and answer anything else that you might want to know about. And with that said, if I have just 2 minutes, I want to show you a very quick video. Let's see if it plays. So we're talking about these small acts, right? I don't know how many of you have seen this. Hopefully there's sound. No sound. Yeah, so I'm not getting sound on this. Sorry, guys. I'll just tell you, look it up. I will be a hummingbird. This story comes from Dirt, the movie. And it's a story about this huge fire and it's happening. And I feel like that's what we're talking about here. There's a huge fire right now. Now, are you going to be one of the animals from the forest who says, it's so big, we can't do anything about it? Or are you going to be like the hummingbird, who even though can only carry drop by drop to put out the fire, is actually doing something to help make a difference? So that's what I hope that you pay forward today, that inspiration and that hope.